Let's jump right into today's explainer because honestly, this is a topic that desperately needs our attention and really our empathy. We're looking at the data behind dyslexia, but more importantly, we're going to completely reframe how we view it. For decades, we've watched these downward spirals in education and life, and, well, we've been blaming the wrong thing. So today, we're tracing the real domino effect of what actually happens when reading failure goes untreated.
Okay, first things first, we need to bust a massive myth right out of the gate. Dyslexia does not cause a kid to drop out of school, it doesn't cause incarceration. As the source material makes incredibly crystal clear, reading failure is optional. Those negative life outcomes we so often tie to dyslexia, they're actually the direct result of untreated reading failure, not the dyslexia itself.
So, understanding this distinction is absolutely crucial. Dyslexia is literally just a difference in how the brain processes written language. It affects people across every single income bracket, every intelligence level. I mean, some of the most brilliant, accomplished people alive are dyslexic. But when a child can't read and nobody steps in to help, school suddenly transforms into this place of daily public failure in every subject. And you know what happens next. Frustration turns into avoidance, avoidance turns into falling behind, and eventually, they just give up.
And this untreated struggle, it snowballs into something truly staggering. 48%. A University of Texas medical branch study found that 48% of Texas inmates showed signs of dyslexia. And then an independent Louisiana study backed that up with almost the exact same number, 47%. The big takeaway here? These weren't people who couldn't learn. No way. They were just people with brains wired to learn differently, who were never actually taught the way they needed to be. And you can trace the earlier stages of this exact same pipeline. 4 times. Students who aren't reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school than their proficient peers. And for the absolute weakest readers, that gap is even wider. Dropping out is just the far end of a chain reaction that starts early on with untreated struggle. Now, what's honestly alarming is what happens when that struggle follows a kid all the way into adulthood. Looking at federal adult literacy data, adults at the lowest literacy levels have the lowest rates of full-time employment and the lowest median earnings of any group measured. Reading isn't just, one academic skill out of many. It's the core foundational skill that literally every other life skill is built upon. We really have to keep this in perspective. 1 in 5 students has dyslexia. The faces behind these staggering dropout and incarceration stats, they aren't rare, isolated cases. They're ordinary kids with a super common learning difference. They simply slipped through the cracks because they never got the right intervention for how their brains work. So how exactly are they slipping through? Well, here's how the system breaks down. Up through 3rd grade, schools actively teach kids how to read. But from 4th grade on, there is this massive shift. The school just assumes they can read. And suddenly, every single subject arrives as text. If a child hits that wall and still can't decode language, they don't just have a reading problem anymore. Now they have a science problem, a history problem, and a math problem. But long before a kid becomes a dropout statistic, this pattern shows up right at the kitchen table. A quick 20-minute homework assignment stretches into 2 grueling hours. There are tears on both sides of the table. You see this bright, incredibly capable kid who can explain complex ideas out loud perfectly, just completely shut down the second a book is put in front of them. You start seeing those mysterious stomach aches on school mornings. And that leads to maybe the most heartbreaking part of all this. When the instruction never changes, the child internalizes all that failure. I mean, a 4th grader isn't going to raise their hand and say, "Excuse me, I seem to have a phonological processing difference," right? Instead, they just conclude, "I'm just stupid," and they stop trying. Those statistics we talked about earlier, they aren't caused by dyslexia. They're caused by years of this exact, unaddressed, emotional, and academic weight stacked on top of it. I want to speak directly to anyone watching right now who might be seeing their own child in this struggle. None of this is a character flaw in your kid, and none of it is a failure of your parenting. What you're seeing is just what a mismatch between a child's brain and traditional classroom instruction looks like from the outside. Your kid is probably working harder than anyone else in their class. They're just doing it without the proper tools to make that hard work actually pay off. Okay, let's pivot to the solution, because there absolutely is one, and it's incredibly effective.
The intervention that has decades of evidence backing it is called structured literacy. It's the engine running underneath recognized programs like Wilson, Barton, and Orton-Gillingham. And it works by doing exactly what traditional instruction skips. It explicitly teaches the code of the English language piece by piece in a highly logical order. And most importantly, it forces practice on that specific skill until it's completely automatic, way before ever adding a new one. And the evidence for this? It's rock solid. The National Reading Panel confirmed that explicit, systematic phonics instruction significantly improves reading outcomes. It bridges that gap between how a dyslexic child's brain works and the weird rules of the English language. This isn't just about learning to cope, it's about measurable, meaningful progress. When structured literacy is used, reading improves, that natural confidence bounces back, and a kid who literally used to dread books suddenly turns into a lifelong learner. It's a total game changer.
The biggest takeaway here is pretty simple. When a child is finally taught the way they learn, everything changes. The difference between those tragic statistics from the beginning of this explainer and the incredible success stories of dyslexic adults comes down to one thing. Someone, somewhere, figured out what was going on, got a comprehensive assessment, and taught that child the way they naturally learn. It completely flips the math on their entire trajectory. Which leaves us with this final thought. If we know exactly how to break this cycle of reading failure, well, the burden is no longer on the student, is it? It's on the system. So how can we change instruction to match the child rather than forcing the child to match the instruction? It's a question we absolutely have to answer for the sake of the 1 in 5 kids just waiting for us to get it right. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.